So one of the craziest things about Bitcoin is that the longer you spend in it, the less you feel like you actually understand in Bitcoin. And I think every Bitcoiner can attest to the fact that when we first got into this thing, it made a little bit of sense. We maybe dabbled a little bit into some altcoins, some other things, thinking that maybe we can't get enough Bitcoin, so let's try out XRP or let's try out Cardano or Litecoin because we can get more of it. The unit bias there is what kind of keeps people away from Bitcoin, I think, right off the hop. But one thing we've come to understand here is that the longer you spend in Bitcoin, the more you realize I don't really know anything about Bitcoin, and the rabbit holes are endless here. So we got a graphic that we want to bring up here called the Dunning-Kruger effect in Bitcoin, and that's what we're going to be talking about today, boys. Where should we start?
So I think everybody starts off with low confidence. They start off, actually, this doesn't even just apply to Bitcoin, it applies to everything. So with Bitcoin specifically, you start off with no knowledge at all. You start off thinking, oh, this is irrelevant. I don't need to learn anything about it. And then you do a little bit of research, you read a couple of headlines, and you think, I know everything. This is a lot simpler than people think it is. This is a lot simpler than people act like it is. And at that point, that's the point where people are when if you were to tell somebody I spent thousands of hours studying Bitcoin, they'd be like, "What did you study for thousands of hours? You're an idiot. Why did you not get this in the first 5 minutes like me?" Right? I know it's a scam. If you spent thousands of hours studying it, then how the hell do you not know that? Right? And I think that's that point. And then after that, once you study it more, once you actually put in the time to learn what it is, you start figuring out that it's a lot more difficult than you thought it was.
Yeah, and there's I think the interesting thing about this is you don't really go out immediately seeking to understand what Bitcoin is. You're usually just brought some information about Bitcoin. So you either stumble upon a post or a friend of yours just randomly starts, "Hey, have you heard about this Bitcoin thing?" Blah, blah, blah. So it's like your knowledge is really just based on that first information that you get. You don't really seek knowledge. So I think and then once you get that first little piece of knowledge, it's really going to have some bias attached to it. It's going to be somebody that's somewhere along this curve as well, that has some understanding and some confidence, right? Maybe they have very little understanding, but they have a lot of confidence about what they're saying. They're saying, oh, Bitcoin's a Ponzi scheme, or it's bad for the environment, or it's slow and there's better technology elsewhere, whatever, right? So you really need to figure out who you're getting your knowledge from the get-go. But then once you go down the road of starting to begin to seek knowledge about Bitcoin, it's natural that your confidence in what you know is going to go down, because one door leads to another, and you start to understand little bits and pieces about Bitcoin, and one thing leads to another, basically, and you begin to understand what you don't understand, and how much there is that you don't understand. I don't think any one person, I don't even think Satoshi fully understands Bitcoin. I think that there's a lot of complexity to it, a lot of subjective ideas around it that are really just based on what people think that it could do or what it will become in the future. And all of that is just subjective, and we don't know if that's all going to play out. But yeah, it's a really funny thing. And I remember when I first learned about Bitcoin, I was confidently telling people in my family, "Oh, this is digital gold. It has a cost of production, these kind of things." And people were like, "What?" And it was just like, I also had no idea what I was talking about, right? Like, that's only one very simplistic way of explaining what this much more complex idea of what Bitcoin is.
100%. When you said that, Forrest, I thought back to my days when I was still a CPA and I was still working in the accounting industry. And I first learned about crypto, I think, before Bitcoin. I knew Bitcoin was there. I knew that you should have some Bitcoin, but I thought the altcoins were the real tech, the real game changers here. And I remember sitting in the boardroom at our office and across from the four partners in our office. And I thought I was this big hotshot crypto guy. Like, I'm like, you guys, we got to start looking at this. And I was probably right in terms of like Bitcoin and thinking about it for clients. But I was like, they're going to be able to track food, the cost of food and where it is and like what ingredients went into it. And like, it's kind of an exciting idea when you first learn about like the blockchain part of it, right? And it's like, okay, I kind of understand this. I'm going to tell everybody because it makes so much sense. But then, of course, you get burned. You realize that there's no actual utility there. You get into Bitcoin, and then you basically spend the majority of your time in Bitcoin. It kind of becomes a problem for a lot of people because the rabbit hole never ends. That's the problem here.
Yeah, the more you learn, the more you know that you don't know everything. The more you start figuring it out, the more you start diving into different rabbit holes, you're gonna realize that, oh, there's way too many networks here that I haven't even thought about. Like, for example, before I read the Bitcoin standard, I thought that I knew everything. After I read it, I thought I knew nothing. Right. And it's crazy because I had added knowledge to my brain, but it felt like I knew nothing. It felt like I knew less than I even started with. So I had even more questions. And I feel like that's the thing. If you don't know something, then you're not going to know what questions to ask. If you don't quite understand a topic, you're not going to know how to navigate it. And other people are going to take advantage of you.
100%.
So what would you guys say to people who are out there right now and are taking this, and then maybe they have some altcoins, maybe they're navigating through Bitcoin? What would your guys' piece of advice for somebody out there who's going through that? And what do you guys think about when you look at the Dunning-Kruger effect and the implication on the average person? To me, this is kind of what it makes me think of it. We talked about the scarcity of Bitcoin. We talk about that all the time. And we say that there's X amount of millionaires, there's only X amount of Bitcoin available. And if you think about who has the assets and the wealth in the world right now, and how willing they are to allocate some to Bitcoin, there's a huge spread there. Even if people had $100,000 in the bank, how many of those people are actually willing to like have the knowledge and the conviction, the understanding of Bitcoin to allocate that into Bitcoin? So to me, I think of the spread here between somebody who's just getting into Bitcoin and people who have been here for longer, and like the value, the conviction, everything is much bigger than we think. I believe anyways.
Yeah. So what I would say there is that it can take a varying degree of time to get to the other side of the Dunning-Kruger effect. That's the goal, though, is to get to that medium level of confidence, that further on the spectrum of knowledge, and to be buying Bitcoin, holding Bitcoin, understanding a lot about Bitcoin. Obviously, not everything, but it takes a lot of work to get there, but the time can be short if you're willing to do the work immediately. So, read the Bitcoin standard, watch the videos, listen to the audiobooks, go into the past of what, the history of Bitcoin, all of that, and speed run this, because you don't want to just stay at the top of confidence, the lack of knowledge. I think the vast majority of altcoiners out there have not read the Bitcoin standard, which is, it gets into the history of money. It's a fairly simple book. It's decently small. It's not that hard to understand some of the key aspects in there. It's not going to make you a Bitcoin genius, but it's going to give a foundational layer of knowledge for you to figure out those other questions to ask. It's a really good step. There's other things you could do as well, other books you could read, other podcasts you could listen to, whatever, but speed run this is what I would do. And that's what I did, because I became obsessed with it once I began to understand Bitcoin. It was all I could talk about. It was all I could think about. It's all I was interested in learning about. And I think that's probably what will happen to a lot of people once they take that step away from that high confidence, low knowledge space. It'll compound, and you'll be more and more interested in speed running the Dunning-Kruger effect.
I think it's possible to speedrun the theoretical knowledge, but the application you can't. You have to go through a cycle in order to see what's actually happening, right? Because you can go through reading books. You can read 1,000 books in a year if you want to, but you need to actually apply it. And if you don't understand market psychology, if you don't understand how to deal with your own psychology, there's no level of education that's going to prepare you for the kind of volatility that we're going to deal with. Like, people think that the volatility is going to slow down over time. I actually think it's going to accelerate. I think it's going to get crazier, because we're going to see governments and massive financial institutions go bankrupt. We saw FTX go bankrupt and Bitcoin dropped 80%. We're going to see other financial institutions dropping like flies because they're going to make stupid decisions. So you can potentially speed up the theoretical side of things, but the application you can't. The reality you can't. You have to go through the cycles. You might think that, oh, a 10% drop got you all seasoned and you're good now, but you're going to go through a 20% drop, and what are you going to do? If you're going to go through a 30% drop, and what are you going to do? 50% drop. Do you really think you're going to be able to hold through it? And I think that's the most difficult part for most people. I'm going to tell you right now that I personally haven't gone through one of those fully yet, but I'm ready for it. I'm okay with it. You have to go through it. It's like a roller coaster, right? You can try to avoid the drop from the very top, but I mean, if you try to get off the roller coaster, you're going to die anyways.
Yeah. So Rajat, basically what you're saying there is at the bottom, it says knowledge in Bitcoin. That should be time in Bitcoin instead.
I think it's a bit of both.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say too. I feel like it's a very fine line that people need to walk here, because if you think about somebody, again, going back to like a baby boomer who has a bunch of assets that they've accumulated so far, and they want to put $100,000 into this asset and kind of fast track it, right? They're going to be way ahead of the people who can't afford that. But if they're way ahead in their investment or the allocation, but they haven't taken the time to learn it, that's going to be meaningless. They're going to lose it. They're going to sell it. They're going to lose their keys to it, whatever. And on the flip side of that, you have somebody who isn't making a lot of money, isn't adding a lot of value to the world. They might be able to accumulate a little bit of Bitcoin, but they have a huge knowledge. That's still going to be fairly irrelevant big picture if they're spending more time learning about Bitcoin versus adding value to the world and converting that into Bitcoin. So I think that there's kind of a fine line that people have to find there. And maybe that is just time then. In terms of shortcutting it though, one thing you could do is just listen to some videos and podcasts on 1.5x. I never used to do that before, but just because there's so much information to consume here, I have been guilty of speeding things up a little bit here. So that's my shortcut that I've taken.
I think that's a great shortcut. You can't. I feel like you can speed up the actual knowledge part of it, the absorption of the actual knowledge, but you can't speed up the conviction.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's like knowledge is like a combination of like, intelligence and experience, right? So you can gain all the intelligence by the books and what I talked about, but yeah,
Right.
like you said, you can't speed up the experience, and those two combined is what makes knowledge. So that was a very good point that I was not pushing on. So yeah, that I think is really important. And yeah, you have to experience the volatility. And Bitcoin's been incredibly volatile because it was such a small speculative asset. But volatility is also because of unpredictability. And as nation states get involved, as companies get involved, all of this, that adds so much layers of unpredictability. People think, oh, that's just buying pressure. That's just means it's going to go up. But really, nobody knows how well everything is going to go. How are they going to hold it? Are they going to sell it? Are they going to lose their Bitcoin? Like, what's going to happen with all of this? All of that unpredictability just raises the volatility. And if you're used to, a 3% drop in the S&P is like the world's ending. We're going to, if that happens in a day, like it's total recession watch, all of this. And it's like 3%, that's nothing when it comes to Bitcoin's movements. So yeah, you gotta live it.
I think the last thing that I would say on this is when we're thinking about what could happen, about the future, I think the best thing that people can do aside from like trying to, learn as much as they can, take in as much information as they can, is just be ready for it. Just manage your expectations. I think that that's the biggest thing, that the biggest piece of advice that I can give to somebody, because I remember the last time in 2020 or 2021, whenever it was, when things were running up, it felt like it would never end. It honestly felt like that run up would never end and we would never go back down. So having lived through that, obviously it helps me. But if people just have the expectation of this thing's going to go down one day, and you have to be ready for that, whether you're leveraging, whether you're relying on that, to live, you have to have that built into your psyche and mentality. I think that's the best thing you can do, is just be ready for it.
Yeah.
That's it. And okay, I think that's about it for today. I think we made some really great points. If you guys do want to support the show, help us out, pump up our Lambo fund, we have this QR code. Oh, this side here. QR code here. You can scan it with a Lightning wallet, and you can give us some Bitcoin, and we'd really appreciate it. It actually goes towards us having fun.
Having fun. That's
Yeah.
what life's about, right? Support the
That's it.
channel.
Gotta have
That was a
fun
good
with your
job,
Bitcoin.
Rajat. You're not a big QR code guy yet, but we'll work on it. So thanks, fellas. I think you did a great job, Rajat. And yeah, send a couple sats this way if you learned anything this episode. So see you on the next one, boys.
Appreciate it, guys.